Well, yeah, I got some microphone working, there's no doubt about that. And I have my camera working, no doubt about that. I come here without a subject today, of course. Let me think if I can figure out what today's date is. I think it's the 29th. It's the 29th of July, 2021. It is a Thursday, and it is a beautiful day in Chicago. This is at the end of what we've had a very hot spell in the city, and now it is cooling off just a bit. We've got a cold front moving in, so for the next few days, we're going to have cool weather. I'm sure that's why you're watching this, to get a weather report. Why wouldn't you, after all? I got flies. I got flies biting me on the ankle. And I don't think I can put up with... I was born on a small cotton farm in Arkansaw, 1947. This is July 29th, 2021. So that was more than 73 years ago. Well, it was more than 72 years ago. It was almost 73 years. Coming up on my 71st birthday, just in another month or so. I have a recollection of what I thought about living on the farm that I've held on to for most of my life, all of my adult life, in fact. And I believe that by the time we left the farm, when I was only 5 years old, that I had learned enough about farming as a 5-year-old that I didn't really want any part of it. And I'd learned enough about Southern people, Southern folks, and their hospitality, and the way they looked at life, that I didn't want much to do with them either. Now, it's quite possible that I didn't form any of those ideas by the time I was 5 years old, that I formed those in my adult life, and I projected them back onto a 5-year-old. We lived in Chicago. I've lived in Chicago all my life, except for a couple of years that I spent in England, and a few months that I lived in California. I've been away for short periods of time on business and what have you. I've spent time in almost every major city in Chicago during my career. That didn't come out right. I've spent time as part of my business career in almost every major city in the country, but I didn't live in them. You know, I might be there for a few days, for a conference, convention, sales call, what have you. But I never remember a time when I wanted to go back and visit family and folks in Arkansas. Now, I don't remember knowing anybody in Arkansas. We left there, as I said, when I was 5 years old, so we did have family there. Some of my mom's family definitely still live down there, and maybe some of my dad's family as well. A lot of us in my dad's family and in my mom's family left that area and migrated to the cities in the north. We came to Chicago. That's where my dad's older brother had moved, and that's where we seemed to have the best chance of getting established and making our way through this world. My mom's family moved to Michigan, Flint, Michigan. And we didn't go there, maybe because they didn't offer the same type of support as my dad's family did. I don't know. why we failed, why we chose Chicago exactly. I do know that my mom had no use for, and in fact had some very bad feelings about my dad's family, and I think that went both ways. So even after we came here to Chicago, and my dad's family lived here, he had brothers and sisters here, maybe aunts and uncles, but we had very little communications with any of those folks because of my mom's relationship with them that had been developed long before I came along. Our primary contact was with my dad's brother, Uncle Frank, and his wife, Aunt Vivian, and it wasn't that much contact. When we moved here, they lived in the city, and within a couple of years, they had moved out to the suburbs. As the suburbs were getting started and kicked off the ground, they decided they wanted to live out there, not in the city. For financial reasons, that was never an option for our family. We were stuck in the city. But I don't recall, even growing up, thinking, gee, I'd like to go back and visit the Ken folks and the folks we left behind in Arkansas. It's not that far. Seth and I did it when he was a young teenager, and we probably made the trip in one way in less than 8 hours. That was with Dad driving with the pedal to the metal and keeping up with a group of cars doing about 115 miles an hour. But even if we hadn't been in that group, that probably, 12 hours drive, maybe a little longer, but not much. And, but as a child and as an adult, I never really had any urge or desire to go back to Chicago. And never to leave Chicago and go back to Arkansas, even for a visit. And we never did. My mom and dad and we kids never went back to visit Arkansas, even though it was only a few hours away. And we could have gone there by bus or, some other low-cost form of transportation. But we didn't go. It wasn't until I was a teenager, I was about 13 years old, living here in this neighborhood, Lincoln Park, just a couple of blocks from here, when Helen and her husband, Eugene, invited Paul and myself, I guess that would be me, Paul and me, to go with them on a short summer vacation trip down to the south, which would include a trip back down to the area where we grew up, down back in Arkansas. Back down in Arkansas. And we made that trip. Now, I don't know why I went. If you go back and look at all the summers I grew up in Chicago, I was here age 5, and I graduated from high school when I was 18. So let's say those 13, 14 years, the only trip I made, other than short Christian summer camps that we went to in Wisconsin, the only summer vacation that we had was that trip to Arkansas with Eugene in his big old American car. I think it was a Ford, but I don't know for sure, with no air conditioning. Because, cars didn't have air. Well, they didn't come standard with air conditioning back then, and that was an expensive option that most people decided they could do without, and we did without on that trip. And it was a trip, the only experience after leaving Arkansas that I had more perspective on what it was like to live down in the country, to live on the farm. On that trip, we went not only to Arkansas, but we traveled through the South and visited with some of Eugene's family, his brothers and sisters. And we stayed with them and got a chance to see what it was like to live on a farm. We stayed. I remember staying with Eugene's family, who were very welcoming and very generous in letting us stay with them, and they fed us and they gave us a place to sleep. I don't remember where we slept, probably on a mattress, but anyway, I had milk straight from the cow. I'd never had that before. Discovered I really didn't like milk straight from the cow. I kind of liked the processed sweet milk that came out of the dairies up in the north. We walked in the fields and saw the crops that they were growing. And I realized that I was so far removed from the South that I could hardly even communicate with those folks. I couldn't understand their language, the way they spoke, and they had almost as much trouble understanding what I was saying. We were out in the cornfield of one of Eugene's brothers, and he had this beautiful corn, so we must have been there sometime in July, maybe August, probably about this time of year. And the corn was over my head, and it was just beautiful green. I don't think I'd ever stood in a place where my vision was so overwhelmed with the greenness. It was just completely green as you walked into the corn. And Eugene said to his brother, you have some beautiful rosinere here. Rosinere. That doesn't even sound like a word to me. I have no idea what he was talking about. Even today, I'm not sure, but I know that means the ear of corn. Maybe it's the word, maybe they're saying roasting ear, like a roasting ear of corn. But it came out, the way I heard it, was rosinere. Could have been an Italian family. And I said to his brother, yeah, you also have some really nice corn. We went fishing with the cousins on that trip, and now I'd fished in the north. We took our little poles over here to the lagoon, and we dropped a worm in on a hook and waited for a fish to bite if we got lucky. Usually I didn't. When someone would ask me, have you ever been fishing, I would say that depends on how you define fishing. When you fish, do you have to catch a fish? Because if you do, I really haven't been fishing, because that's not the result of my outings that we called fishing. I didn't catch fish. Certainly didn't catch many fish. But we fished, and one of the cousins said to me, you need air hook? Or you want air hook? And I was like, again, those words had little meaning to me. I understood the word hook, and that he was talking to me about a hook, but I didn't know what he meant. And I thought he said, do you have our hook? But he said, do you need air hook? And all he was saying was, do you need a hook? But I said to him, no, I've got my own hooks. I brought them here. And then we went fishing down on the Mississippi River. And I did not trust that river. When I walked around the lagoon here, when I went fishing, every place you walked was solid. You could see where the water started, and you could see where the bank started. And the two were separate things. You could put your feet firmly on one and not be afraid of sliding in. But the river, we weren't in a place where humans were intended to go. We just stopped the car on the side of a road, and then we made our way down to the river, and there were rocks and overgrowth, and it just was not a place where a young city kid would feel comfortable, and I did not feel comfortable. And we were fishing, and people caught fish. I might have caught a fish. I don't remember it. I mean, I'm not sure it would have been something I would have celebrated anyway. I knew from the little experience I'd had of trying to eat fish caught in lakes and rivers in Chicago, I did not like the taste of fish caught in fresh water. I didn't know that I would like the taste of fish caught in ocean waters. I didn't know the difference because I'd never had ocean fish other than tuna in a can, which was okay. So we're fishing on that lake, that river, that Mississippi River, that massive flow of river. You could hardly see the other side. And we were catching fish. And one kid pulled a fish out. And as he's reeling it in or pulling it in with his pole or however he was catching it, on the end of that fish is a water moccasin, bigger than my arm. It was a huge freaking fish. Of course, they immediately took whatever was convenient there, rocks or clubs, and they bashed that snake and killed it. And I found that a very disturbing event. I think I was the only one that was like, what the? I don't want to be here on this river catching water moccasins. I mean, I like the idea of catching fish as long as you throw them back, but you know, if somebody else is going to eat them, maybe I'll eat a fried fish. Maybe if you deep fry the things are okay. If I would have known we were fishing in a sewer, I would have been even less interested in eating that fish. But then they said, we're going to come back here tonight and fish. That's when the real action of fishing is. I don't even know what that means. There's nothing in the framework of things that I had experienced in my life that made fishing at night, other than my brother fishing on the banks of Lake Michigan right over there, just down over there, about a half a mile. He fished on the lakefront at night, but there you stood on a cement improved bank with lights, Coleman that you pumped up, and it was about as bright as day, standing there fishing, and the fish were out there in the lake, and you caught fish, and there was no. The biggest excitement there is that if some hooligan came by and caught and disturbed you, but the fish weren't going to bother you, and there certainly weren't going to be. You weren't going to pull any lake snakes out of Lake Michigan. I'd been fishing with my brother a few times, and I'd never seen a snake, and I'd seen my brother handle snakes, so I knew that there were no lake snakes. Otherwise, he'd have been handling them. But the idea of going back at night, because that was when the action was, I was like, yeah, action for those snakes, because you won't see them at night. And that night I made it clear when they were packing up to go fishing that I wasn't going to go. Well, the women are going to go to the movies and see some movie. I didn't care. I would go with the women or stay home, but I wasn't going anywhere near those damn snakes again. I didn't like the snakes during the day when I could see them, and I knew I wasn't going to like them at night when I couldn't. I still don't understand what night fishing on. I guess I'd have to talk to somebody who knows what that's about. But night fishing on the Mississippi River, I don't know, because I didn't do it. And there were, lots of incidents. I found that it just seemed to me that Southern kids, and they were just kind of mean. And I didn't need meanness. It just didn't. I mean, I was kind of a wimpy kid. I didn't need anybody like picking on me or making me a target of their meanness. And my brother Paul and Eugene, they got meaner when we were in the South. I mean, they picked on me when we were in the North. It was for my own good, I'm sure. But they just, I mean, the level of meanness, they turned it up a notch or two. We went swimming in some swimming hole. I don't recommend that either. You know, and that was another thing. Where are the ladders? How do you get out of this hole? Where's the tile? How do you swim here? This mud is as slippery as grease. And swimming hole. It was just some ditch that the water would run into from the rain, and you would swim in it. If I knew today what I knew, if I knew then if I knew back then what I know now, I definitely wouldn't have gone swimming in that hole. But my brother Paul and Eugene decided to make that because they knew I was afraid of snakes now, because they'd seen my reaction to the Mississippi outing. So they became snakes underwater, and they would come and they would pinch my leg or bite me. I went home like with bruises and marks from my brother and my brother-in-law snaking me up in a water hole, in a swimming hole. So as we were down in the South, about the only thing I found that I liked is we went to a little ice cream, probably a little general store that served scooped ice cream. And I'd never seen anything like it. It was a nickel a scoop. And I was like, is there a limit on how many scoops I can have? No, however many nickels you have, you can. And I'd saved a little bit of money to go on this trip, so I walked out of there with an ice cream cone about 8 scoops high. Because down, in Chicago, you didn't find no nickel ice cream cones, especially somebody scooping them for you and making a nice, fresh ice cream cone. When we got to Arkansas, after stopping and visiting Eugene's family, things got quiet there, and we went to visit my Uncle Bob. Uncle Bob, he was like one of those legends that I didn't know him, but I'd heard his name mentioned in the family discussions, and he was Uncle Bob. They called him Uncle Bob. And he brought a truckload of watermelons one summer that he decided that he was going to bring the watermelons that he had direct to market in Chicago. He loaded up his truck and he came, and we had watermelons rolled under our beds for like 2 weeks after he left. We were eating those watermelons. As long as they remained edible, we were eating them. Those were the best watermelons I ever ate in my life. Uncle Bob grew them. And we were visiting Uncle Bob at his house, and I think I'm going to say his wife's name was Aunt Peggy, because that's what I remember, but I'm sure it wasn't. And we were sitting on the stoop, on the steps out front of his house, and we're having a conversation with him, and this couple of black kids walked by, and they yelled up onto the porch, "Hey, Uncle Bob," and he waved back, and they went on, and I was like, how does that work? I got black cousins? Is there something I don't know about this family? No, he wasn't my uncle, they said. He was just, that was what people called him in that area. And there were people down there with names like that, whose names were major. They gave people names that put position or title into their existence that you mistakenly, at least I did, would accept as real. Uncle Bob was my uncle. He wasn't even related to us. Neither was Aunt Peggy. So I learned that while we were there. We may have stayed with Uncle Bob. I don't remember who we stayed with when we were there. So when we came back to Chicago, and that trip, it was a very low budget trip. We had, we would stop at a little store on the way and buy some bread and some lunch meat, some mustard maybe, and maybe some Pepsi. They were Pepsi drinkers, Helen and Eugene. And we'd stop at a little rest area on the side of the road. We'd eat our bologna sandwiches and we'd continue on. And I think we ate that was pretty much probably a bologna trip the whole time we were down there. But it did not change my opinion of the South. I didn't come back from there thinking, well, that was fun. I can't wait till we go back down and repeat that. I mean, I don't think I ever, after that, I don't think I ever drank a glass of unpasteurized milk straight out of a cow after that. Never. And I don't think I've ever felt deprived in my life because I wasn't able to drink milk straight out of the cow. I felt lucky that we were in the city. Yeah, if we would have grown up on the farm, we would have had different experiences. We would have been different people. And I'm not entirely happy with the person I turned out to be. I think there's some areas could have improved. Maybe farm life would have been better for that. But I will say that I have no regrets that my family decided to leave the farm when I was 5 years old, and we never looked back.